So I just want to thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us today. My name is Lo, and I'm a digital marketing consultant here at Zuri Group. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, Zuri Group is a full-service consulting agency that works exclusively with nonprofits, from peer-to-peer fundraising, website redesigns, digital advertising, and Google Grants account maintenance, to fundraising strategy, system assessments and selections, and full-scale CRM implementations, and everything in between. We are passionate about helping nonprofits use technology to build better relationships with their constituents and maximize their impact. We're going to be recording today's webinar, so we'll have a link to a video to share with everyone. But today we're going to be walking you through everything you need to know so that you can send effective emails out of the Engaging Networks platform. We're going to be going over best practices for editing email templates, the right way to send emails, build your lists, and handle unsubscribes, setting up supporter segmentation using profiles, as well as tips for contacting active and inactive fundraisers on peer-to-peer events. Leading us through these topics today is Skeff Lynn. Skeff is a resident email marketing and database consultant here at Zuri Group. Prior to joining us, Skeff spent over 11 years at Blackbaud, and his technical expertise spans a broad range of systems, including Sphere, Luminate, ExactTarget, Salesforce, WordPress, Silverpop, Email Playground, and of course, Engaging Networks. So we're in very good hands today. Skeff, I'm going to pass presenter rights over to you now. And I will be keeping an eye on the chat today for questions, so please don't be shy.
All right. So I wanted to get started just, sort of at the basic level in Engaging Networks. So let's start by talking about the difference between an email and an email template, right? So here we're looking at our email campaigns. If I go over here, we're in our template section. And a template is, the idea is that you start with something that you've tested in different email platforms and that has some editable sections so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time that you send an email. Templates should be set up sort of to set it and forget it, right? You want to get your testing done, make sure everything looks good, and then that way, when you go back and you're actually building your email, you're only focusing on these sort of editable sections, right? So you're just swapping out text or adding some images or things like that. Part of the reason for this is that there's not a lot of consistency across email platforms. The example I'm using right now is a very simple donation thank you email pulled out of the peer-to-peer module, just as a demonstration, and it's pretty bulletproof. You can see here, this is a email testing software that we call Email on Acid, and it shows what this email is going to look like in different email clients. And even with something this simple, you can see that there's a little bit of variation that happens. And that's normal and to be expected, but you want to try to get your templates to the point where they look reasonably consistent across different platforms. I do have some exciting news, which is that we are very close to rolling out new branding email templates to Big Brothers Big Sisters affiliates. Those should be ready reasonably soon. We're kind of in the final QA testing stages. And so once you have those, you can set them up in Engaging Networks in your template section, and they'll be ready for you to swap things in and out in your email builder. Part of the reason that it is so important to make sure that your templates have been tested in different email platforms, as I said, is this lack of standardization that happens among email clients. If we look at our template here, and I won't bore you too much with what all this stuff does, but you have style information in the head section. There are probably some of you on this call who are old enough to remember the early days of the internet, when you would go to a website and it would say, this site optimized for Internet Explorer, or this site optimized for Netscape. And the reason that they did that is because at the time, there weren't broadly accepted standards for how an internet browser should render HTML code or how it should render CSS. There is a nonprofit organization that sort of acts as a governing body that pushes for standards in terms of what code should render and how among different internet browsers, and that's the W3 Consortium. We're sort of looking at their website right now, and you'll notice that while they talk about a number of different things, one of the things that you don't see in this list, right, is email design. For whatever reason, email providers have not gotten together to say, let's make this, let's make our code look the same on everything. And Outlook is in fact one of the sort of worst offenders in this regard. Different versions of Outlook may show an email differently depending on minor variations in the code. So it's important to get your templates tested and looking good as your starting point. And again, we do have some new email templates that we'll be rolling out to affiliates shortly. So you'll set them up in your template section, but once you've got them, you want to set and forget, right? And you want to do your editing in the email builder. Do you have any questions on any of that so far?
None in the chat.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to talk about a couple of real life pitfalls here. I'm going to use at least one real life example because I'm going to be using some ridiculous cat pictures later, and I don't want that to be all you see. So one of the sort of really common pitfalls, particularly with Outlook, is image sizing. Because there is standardization in web pages and Engaging Networks uses a web-based email editor, it respects a lot of the newer ways that you could use to size images using styling, right? And we're back in our email testing software looking at what a particular Bowl for Kids' Sake recruitment email from BBBS of the Midlands looked like a few weeks ago. And you can see that our iPads and some of our iPhones handle this pretty well, right? And we just, get a quick view of what this email was intended to look like. Looks pretty good. When we get to our desktop devices, though, you start seeing like what's going on. This email has suddenly blown up in different versions of Outlook. And so if we look at what happened here, first our banner image is much larger than it was in our iPads and so forth, but our sponsor image has just taken over the screen. And that's because Outlook is not respecting the methods of sizing images using code that other clients like iPads or web pages would use. So what do? The easiest way to work around this is just to resize the image. And let's see if we have an example of that. So if we resize the image and we say, instead of this banner image being, say, 1100 pixels wide, or our sponsor image being over 1400 pixels wide, if we actually resize those to be, say, 600 wide, which is the size of the template, or to make that sponsor image 300 pixels wide, which is about the size that the affiliate had specified using styling, then we see that these emails come through and they look good. So the most foolproof way to avoid this common pitfall is just to make your images the size that you actually want them appear when the email is sent. For me, I would do that using Photoshop. I know that not everybody has Photoshop, so I want to alert you to a tool that's available, which is this free online picture resizer. That's at picresize.com, and we can share that link with anybody after the webinar if you're interested. And this is just an online utility that you can upload an image, specify the new size that you want, and it'll resize it for you. Another common question then is, how do I know how big I want my images to be? How big should they be? So for that, I have two suggestions. One is there's a great tool called Pixel Ruler. This is a free utility that you can install on your desktop, and you just line it up on your screen and you'll see, oh, hey, Steph said this image was 300 pixels wide, and there it is, it's 300 pixels wide. So you can use this as a way to gauge image sizes and how much real estate you have to work with. More broadly, I would say that smaller screens like cell phones, mobile devices, go down to about 300 pixels wide. On a desktop, you never really want to design an email that takes up more than somewhere in the 600 to 700 pixel range. You're never really designing your email to fill an entire desktop screen. So those are just sort of some general standards that we have. So let's go back into engaging networks here. And we'll jump into our email builder. And we'll look at this same sort of problem that I just described and how you would see it in engaging networks. So we're going to come up here to our WYSIWYG, and we're going to insert an image. And for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to use good old Burrito Cat. Right? And you can see that engaging networks tells us how large this image is. And 1600 pixels wide is way too big for a standard email. And you would say, okay, so let's make it 300 wide. And again, when we insert that image into our email, it's going to look fine. If we were to actually send it without any further modification, we're going to have the same issue that we just saw with that Bowl for Kids' Sake recruitment issue. So again, it's going to work fine on our iPads and our iPhones, most of our mobile devices. But once we start to get an Outlook, we can see that suddenly Burrito Cat takes over the whole email. So if we don't want to resize the image, what do we do? I want to start by saying that I don't expect everyone to do this, and that I have an enhancement request in to engaging networks for them to update the email editor to insert this information automatically. So I don't know what the status of that request is at this moment, but down the road we may have an improvement that hopefully will allow us to avoid having to do this. But let's take a look at the code real quick. So here's our image tag for good old Burrito Cat. And we can see that Engaging Networks has resized the image using a style tag. Again, that's supported in a lot of devices, but not in Outlook. So we don't want our images to blow up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use old school HTML height and width attributes. So we're just going to say height equals 225, width equals 300. If we switch back to our view, it doesn't look any different here. But if we were to test that and to actually send that email now, what we'll see is that in our, whoops, wrong one. What we will see is that our image will be resized correctly in Outlook as well as the clients where it was working before. So that's how we would address this image blowing up issue if we didn't want to resize the image itself. So there's another common issue that we see related to this lack of standardization among email clients, where not all email clients will support not all email clients will support CSS in the head section of the document. So just to show what that means, this information up here, which we looked at a little while ago, all of these styles, they come before the body of the email, right? So this is where the actual body of the email begins. This section is what we would call the head section. Not all email clients support CSS in this section. So I'm going to use kind of a ridiculous example here, but if we just updated one thing in that head section, right? So we've added a color to make our email text show up in green. And we want to keep in mind, of course, that our text is in a paragraph, so it's using a paragraph tag. Paragraph tags are pretty universal, so we're going to see pretty wide support for styling paragraphs. But if we were to create an email that was using that green text, for example, and we were to send it without checking this box right here that I want to call your attention to, here's what we would get. And let me just bring that up. Okay, so as we would expect, our iPads and iPhones are going to render that correctly. Most things are going to pick that up, as we had noted. Even some of our desktop clients are going to pick that up fine, but notice AOL doesn't pick up that change that we made. What this checkbox does, the CSS inline, is it basically takes the style information that we had in the head section of our document, and it puts that into each little tag on the page. So when it finds a paragraph tag later in the page, it's going to insert that color style along with it. And so what we see is, if we were to run a test and we do check the CSS inline box, then it's going to fix that color change in AOL. And I know this is in some ways not the greatest example, because there is pretty widespread support otherwise. But for things like table cells or padding or floats, things that we use for positioning, whether or not you check that little inline CSS box will make a world of difference in ensuring that the look of your email is consistent among different email clients. So our recommendation is that you always keep this checked. Any questions there?
Nope, we're looking good.
Okay. So I'm trying to cover a lot of ground today, so I want to move on to talking about deliverability. When you send an email, associated with your domain is what they call an SPF record. And an SPF record stands for Sender Policy Framework. And the way to think about this is that an SPF record basically says, these are the servers that are allowed to send mail on behalf of this domain. So right now we're looking at azbigs.org, and I've gone ahead and looked up what text records do they have associated with that domain, and we can see that they have an entry which is their SPF record, and they're using Outlook.com to send email. So when they send an email through Outlook.com, the receiver does an SPF check on their end and says, okay, yep, Outlook.com is authorized to send mail on behalf of azbigs.org. And they also say, okay, I see that eactivist.com is authorized to send mail on behalf of azbigs.org. This eactivist entry is the entry that we want if we're sending mail using one of our domains through the Engaging Networks platform. If Zuri Group launched your website along with your Engaging Networks setup, chances are you've got this in place. But I wanted to point this out because this is one of the most important things that you can do to ensure that you have good delivery rates. If you don't have an SPF record, or if you don't have the entry for Engaging Networks in place, when you send email, the recipient's email client will look at your domain and say, wait a second, this email is coming from azbigs.org, but maybe they're not authorized. Maybe Engaging Networks is not authorized to send email on their behalf, and they may treat that as spam. So again, this is something that's pretty easy to check. I'm using cloth.net, and again, we can share this link after the webinar. And I'm just doing a query on text records here. SPF records are a type of text record. And what we want to see when we look at our SPF record is this entry for Engaging Networks. All right. So then just another kind of couple of sort of more best practice kind of things in terms of deliverability. One of the things that email clients will look at is the ratio of text to the ratio of images. I have seen some affiliates and others who get frustrated with all of the variability in email clients. And one way to ensure that your email looks really consistent from one device to another is to put everything in a single image, right? And this is tempting because it gives you a lot of control. But your email clients are probably not going to accept this, right? Here, you know, just as an example of what I'm talking about, I've created a burrito cat email and just put all of the information right in the image. Again, email clients will look at this and say, hey, wait a second, there's no text in this email. It's just one big image. And that may be enough to get you sent to a junk folder. You're also going to have issues where, for example, in Outlook, typically the user has to actively click to download those images. And so when the email hits their inbox, it's not going to be a great experience for them because it's going to look like this, right? So if they then go in and download the image, then they can see what you're talking about. But again, that's not a great user experience. And then lastly, for people with visual impairments who use screen readers, there's nothing for the screen reader to read in an email like this. So you want to steer clear of this notion of using one big image for your email. You want to have sort of at least a 50-50 ratio of text to images. Another one that I will point out is that you want to avoid marketing terms, right? If you have a free event, it's okay to say that it's free, but you probably don't want to use the word free 30 to 40 times in your email. You also want to avoid using click here. It's very tempting, it's easy, and it may not be enough to get your email sent to spam on its own. But when email clients are weighing whether something is spam or not, they look at a number of factors and you kind of get a score. So the more things that add to your score, the more likely you are to go to spam. Instead of click here, it's a best practice to use, the verb that you're wanting them to complete. So, for example, if you want them to download a receipt, instead of saying click here to download your receipt, you can just say download your receipt and make that the link. Unsubscribe as opposed to click here to unsubscribe, things like that. Another thing that'll help is use your brand's name in the from line when you are sending your email. Right? So I'm in a demo account, so this is obviously not a great example here, but instead of just saying Skeff Flynn, I might say, as the sender, Skeff with Zuri Group. That tells your users who you are and what organization you're with, if they're not used to seeing your name, if they don't know you personally. And it will help reduce spam complaints, and in some cases even it'll help to improve open rates. So just another good best practice there. And then I should also talk a little bit about engaging networks and what they do to ensure deliverability. Because the reality is that most email that is sent is spam. I was reading some statistics the other day that said, roughly 60 to 70% of all email that is sent is spam and gets treated as such. So the reality is that most email actually gets rejected, right? We sometimes think, well, why didn't my email go through? There should be no reason for my email not to go through. But in the fight against spam, the reality is that the majority of emails don't go through. So we want to make sure that we are doing what we can to build a good reputation as a sender. And that's true both for you as organizations and for Engaging Networks as an organization, as the provider. One of the things that Engaging Networks does in order to help ensure that is they collect data on all of the email that they send and measure some things like open rates and click-throughs and things of that nature. And so when you send an email out, they actually send that email first to the people that they know have opened emails from engaging networks in the past. So they're sending first to the people who are most likely to want that email, who are most likely to open that email, and who are most likely not to click the spam button. And so what happens is, as the mailing goes out, the email service providers see that people are opening the email, people are not hitting the spam button, and they're less likely to do any sort of content blocking or email rejection as a result. And so because of this practice, Engaging Networks is able to maintain really very high delivery rates. Any questions on anything so far?
Looks like we're doing okay, Skip.
All right. So the next thing that I want to talk about is sending, and in particular, query building and then unsubscribe management. For our purposes, I don't think I'm going to actually send the Burrito Cat email as much as some of you might like to see that in your inbox. But we'll take a look at the query builder and just talk through a few things. So I'm in our send step, and you have a couple of options here. Opt-in, of course, is a great one to use, as you know, if you've been really good with your list hygiene and most of your users have a confirmed opt-in equals yes, then opt-in is a great place to go. I think for a lot of affiliates, you may have more contacts than opt-ins, and so you may want to try to reach more of those supporters another way. You can, of course, build queries elsewhere in Engaging Networks, save them and bring them in here. But let's look at the query builder itself. The first thing to note is that if you want to save your work, you can store your query. So you just give it a name and make sure that box is checked. And then you're going to build your universe of all possible records. So in the query builder, this blue bar is, let's start with the largest set of records that we can. So for some of you, that might be all users. Other things that you might want to try would be, let's get everyone who has donated through a specific donation form, right? Or all peer-to-peer registrants, or all peer-to-peer donors, or similarly, anyone who has participated in a specific ticketed event. So you would start, that's where you would start. You say, okay, we want to build our biggest possible data set. When we look at these other sections, filter, our green bar, we have the same options up here, but filter the green will always be a subset of the blue, right? And similarly, our red is an exclusion. So blue is your largest possible set of contacts that you want to reach out to. If you want to filter that down to a subset of those contacts, you'll use the green filter portion to do that. And if you want to exclude records, you're going to do that here in this red section. And of course, one thing that you always want to exclude is people where your opt-in, and I would say contains N, and remove the case, the match case. So anyone who has a no value for your opt-in, you want to make sure that you exclude them here. When people unsubscribe, Engaging Networks isn't automatically excluding them from your mailings. They're updating the value for that opt-in unsubscribe. So let's talk a little bit about unsubscribes and some of the things that you'll need to do to manage that. One thing that you're going to need is you're going to need an unsubscribed landing page of some kind, right? So you can manage those by going to Pages, Components, right? So Pages, Components, and then coming over here to Web Pages. So you can see I've already got one set up. If you wanted to make a new one, you can do that and just make sure your type is unsubscribe. These can be fairly simple. I'm just kind of borrowed one from the BBS Midlands affiliate. So let's look at what that would look like if I were to actually hit it. And the reason that you need this is just so that once somebody clicks the unsubscribe link, they have some sort of a verification that their request has been processed. Alternately, you could set up what Engaging Networks calls a subscription center. And I'll give you a quick look at what that might look like. I think for most of you, this might not be useful, but if you're using a number of different opt-ins to manage your communications, for example, if you had an opt-in list for all users, an opt-in list specifically for Bowl for Kids' Sake participants, and an opt-in list specifically for Bigs only, you might want to set something like this up where when they hit the unsubscribe link, they come to a subscription center page where they're able to update their profile information, and then they can choose what they do or do not want to receive. Again, if you're only using one opt-in, this is probably not beneficial to you, but if you're using a number of opt-ins, this may make sense. I won't go over all of the setup details for that, but to create a subscription center, you'll go to Pages, Manage Pages. Here's the one that we were just looking at, but if you wanted to click New, you can see that the page type is email subscriptions. Okay. Okay. So once we have our unsubscribed landing page or our subscription center, we're going to want to make sure that we have that link in our email. So if we go back and look at an email, in this template, I've not added one. So I'm going to go ahead and add one now. Typically, I would say that you should have an unsubscribe link in the template, but you still want it to be editable because you may at some point change what opt-in you're using or add or remove opt-ins, things of that nature. So you want to make sure that you have a way to edit this, if for no other reason than to verify that the information is still correct. So I'm going to go ahead and add an unsubscribe link at the end of this email. And if I highlight it and I look at my WYSIWYG editor here, you can see we have an insert unsubscribe link option. And the first thing that it's going to ask me is for my landing page. So do I want the subscription center or the landing page? Let's go ahead with the landing page. And then which opt-in should it be opting them out of? So those are the two things that you have to verify. and hit OK. And that's how you set up your unsubscribe links. Again, when somebody hits that unsubscribe link, Engaging Networks isn't going to stop them from receiving emails automatically. It's just going to update the value for that opt-in question to a no value. So anytime that you do send an email, it's very important that in your query, you go to that red bar and you exclude anyone where the opt-in that you're using contains M. All right. So we mentioned at the start that we also had some profiles to talk about. And profiles, for any of you who may have been familiar with Blackbaud Sphere, profiles are similar to what were called dynamic segments in Sphere. So we're going to go over here to data and reports, and we're going to go to profiles. Okay. So profiles are a way to flag some section of your contact database. So you can see I have a couple of things set up here. So let's take a look at what our options are. So one particularly useful profile is peer-to-peer captains. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this profile. And you can see we have our filters. For filter type, I have selected peer-to-peer supporter type. And so this simple profile is just looking for supporters who are group leaders in this specific event. Now, once I've set that up, you have the option to schedule this. And so if this is selected, and you'll see, obviously, these have this square around them, which shows that they have been set up to run automatically, whereas these do not. Once you have selected this, basically every day, a job will run that will look for people who meet the criteria of this profile, right? If you're creating a brand new one, you can also run it immediately so that, you know, if you need to get an email out to team captains and you don't want to wait a day, go ahead and run it, and it should update within a few minutes to half an hour or so. And then you can use that profile as a basis to send your email. Let's look at another one here. This would be peer-to-peer goal reached. And again, we're going to add a filter, and in this case, it's going to be that peer-to-peer goal reached. And once again, we're going to select our event. We also have a slider here. So if I want to say, okay, let's find supporters who are, you know, halfway to their goal, we can do that here as well. And then another thing that I wanted to point out, I'm not going to go through every profile type, but another thing that I wanted to point out is I've set up a profile called previous year major donor, right? So using the fundraising donation amount filter, I can find supporters who made a donation of $500 through $10,000, right, in US dollars, and then you can set a date range. So this might be useful in other profiles as well. You have the option to set a date range of, you know, give me people who were who reached their goal during this date range. So it's just another option for you. And again, when you are actually going to send your email, in the query builder, we can pull up profiles here. So this little group of cartoon characters we can use to find our, for example, our peer-to-peer team captains. In addition to that, I'd like to talk a little bit about a release that actually just went out this week. In our peer-to-peer module, we now have what we call milestone fundraising emails. And this is very similar to the reach your goal email that we were looking at. So these I have not actually set up yet, but what you would do is you just click on this new milestone email link here, and you'll get one of these. So let's just go ahead and add a third one. And then if we edit this email, you can see that you have a triggering percentage, right? So again, let's say that we want to automatically send an email to anyone who hits 50% of the goal. There's a couple of things about this that are pretty exciting. One is that if you were to do this through profiles, you would have to, if you did a first mailing where you sent to people who had reached 50% of their goal, and then a week later you wanted to do another mailing to people who had reached 50% of their goal, you'd have to figure out a way to exclude the people who got that first mailing. By adding these milestone emails to the peer-to-peer platform, anyone who hits 50% of their goal will get this email automatically, and they won't get it again, right? And you can set up these milestone emails at varying levels. So for example, if somebody's at 100%, you can say, hey, way to go. What about a stretch goal of a little bit more? The other nice thing about this is that you can pull in some of the variables from their fundraising page that wouldn't necessarily be available in other sections of engaging networks. So then just a couple of thoughts along this line. I would encourage you to take advantage of things like the milestone emails. I would encourage you to send emails to your team captains with things like tips and tricks, encouragement for personalizing their participant pages, right? When you do so, just sort of a couple of, these are very general thoughts, but you want to try to make compelling subject lines. You want your calls to action to be clear and visible in your email. And you want to encourage people to fundraise via, emailing their friends and sharing your message through your social channels. And I think the last thing that I wanted to touch on is that as we talk about some of these profile options that you have, Engaging Networks has what they call a marketing automation tool, which is available to you and part of the Zen Solutions software package. And marketing automation allows you to do some of the things like these milestone emails, for example, where I was saying, okay, it'll automatically send an email to anybody who hits a certain percentage. you can use marketing automation in a similar way for other purposes, right? So you could have a welcome series, for example, of someone signs up for your newsletter and you send them an email a week later to welcome them. You send them a follow-up email, maybe to solicit a donation, things like that. And so marketing automation can be a powerful way to leverage profiles. The tool is included with your subscription. It does require a little bit of thoughtfulness in the setup. And so some of the setup for marketing automation is outside of the standards and support, though we are happy to send you training videos, or if you really feel like you need some extra consulting in that area, let us know and we can get you a quote. Do we have any questions?
I don't see any in the chat. Please, if you do have any, feel free to type them in. But Scaff, that was so great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just a few quick comments again. One, we do have some new branding email templates that we will be rolling out to the affiliates. We will let you know when those are ready. And I'm happy to share any of the links that I talked about to some of the tools like Pixel Ruler or Pick Resize or cloth.net if anyone is interested. So thanks for coming, and yeah, enjoy your day.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As I mentioned, we will have a link to today's recording to share with you all, so please keep an eye on your email inbox for that. And we do have regular webinars, so if you'd like to sign up for our mailing list so that you're always alerted when we've got another one up and coming, I will go ahead and pop the link for you guys to subscribe into the chat. And if you have any questions about what we've talked about today, or if you've got an upcoming project that we can be of assistance on, please reach out to us at innovations@zurigroup.com. We'd love to speak with you. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you at the next webinar.